Alright, picking up where we left off from the last video, you should have all of your pieces of fabric cut out. Make sure you check in the pattern exactly how many pieces you need of each. It's all listed here on page 3. And then we're going to start piecing, and we're just going to follow the directions as noted in the pattern, but we are going to start with block A instead of block B. So you have all of your strips that you cut in the previous video. You need to have two piles. You need to have a right pile and a left pile, and I will show you mine. This is my left pile. I've already started on my left pile, but in your right pile and your left pile, you should have the same fabrics. These should be matches of each other. So you've got two piles of fabric. This is my left, this is my right. I've already worked on the left. I'm going to show you with this video. I'm going to show you on the right. I recommend that, the reason I recommend working right and left is because you can chain piece these and move through them really quickly on your sewing machine if you work one side at a time, and I will show you on my sewing machine exactly how I chain piece that. So let's begin with one of the sides. So these are all my right side blocks. These are the pieces that go on the top of the block after, so we don't need these right now. I'll set them aside, and you should have a giant stack of squares. This is not all of my squares. It's just enough that you can see what we're working on. So let's work with one strip for now, just to keep it simple. On your square, draw a line diagonally on the wrong side. I don't do this for all of mine. I'll explain to you in the next step how I do it at my sewing machine, that I don't have to mark them all. But if you are somewhat new to quilting, I absolutely recommend that you don't skip this step, that you mark. So the two pieces of the block are opposite of each other. So here I've got the left side block that I've already sewn. I can move that up a little bit. And I don't know if you can tell with the video because it's hard to see, but my seam is going this direction on this side of my block, which means that this piece needs to have the seam running this direction. They need to be mirror images of each other. If they weren't, you would end up with a very different block. It would still be cute, but it's not what we're intending. So line that up on the bottom, and if your fabric is directional, this is at the bottom. And just make sure that you pay attention in the pattern the direction the seam runs, so that you have mirror images when you go to sew your blocks together. Go to your machine and sew along the line that you drew. Sew right on the line, and then we'll come back in and I'll show you what to do next. I mentioned in the video that I chain piece these blocks so that they go together more quickly. I want to show you how I do that. So I sew all of the left sides of the block and then all the right sides of the block. So I have what's left of my strips for my right or left hand side. I can't remember which side it is. And I have my stack of squares. I am using seam tape by Allison of Cluck Cluck Sew. This is what it looks like. It is pretty much washi tape that you put on your machine. You can remove it. It comes off great. You'll have to replace it every once in a while. I love this because it makes it so I don't have to individually mark each of these squares. I don't have to draw the diagonal line on all of the squares. So I have the red line of the tape lined up with the red with my stitching line. So I know this is exactly where my machine is stitching. For this for this project, I don't need to use the 1/4 inch lines that are the black lines on each side. So I have started sewing my square. As I sew, I'm going to keep this tip lined up exactly on this red line, and then I know I have a perfect diagonal, and then I will just pick up a strip and a square and a strip and a square, and I will show you how I do that so you can just kind of see my workflow. You can see that I didn't stop to cut in between each one, and since all of these pieces are the same angle, as long as I'm stitching everything the same direction, I know that I'm stitching the correct way with all of my blocks. I have my right and left pieces sewn, so at this point I would recommend you do all your rights and then all your lefts and then come and do this step. So I've got all my rights and all my lefts. I'm going to begin by trimming a 1/4 inch on the outside of the line you drew. So I usually like to take my quilt ruler, place the 1/4 inch mark on my stitching line, and then trim. And do the same thing for the other piece. Then take these pieces to your machine, or excuse me, take these pieces to your iron and press the seam. So I will kind of press that so you can kind of see what it's going to look like. When you go to your iron and press the seam, on one of the sides, press the seam down towards the background fabric. On the other side, press your seam up towards the print fabric. And keep it consistent. If you press all of your left sides down, press all your right sides up, so that when you go to assemble your blocks, it makes it as quick as possible. And I'm going to go ahead and press these. These seams are pressed in opposite directions. If you look at it from the back, it probably is a better example of how it looks. Now, take the two pieces and place them right sides facing, and focus right here. Hopefully that's focusing in the right spot. It's hard to tell on the camera monitor if it's focusing in the right spot. Those two pieces of fabric are right on top of each other, and the seams are going in opposite directions so they nest or lock into each other. Pin your seam right there, and then I usually pin it here and then at the bottom, and stitch the two pieces together along this long side. My two pieces of fabric are sewn together. Press the seam. You can press the seam to one side or to open. I do find personally that pressing long seams like this open usually gives me better results, so the seam doesn't get to be as wavy sometimes as if you press it to the side. So you're almost done with your block. The last thing you need to do, I don't know if you recall in the last video, I mentioned to cut as many of these as possible. And if you're careful with your cutting, you should be able to get one of these pieces from each of your strips. And so now all you have to do, and don't overthink this part because you could drive yourselves crazy and spend all day, just pick a fabric that you like to sew to the top of the block. So, you know, I like to have some contrast, but I wouldn't want to use that because it's the same print. So this polka dot would be nice, or this gingham would be very cute. I'm going to go ahead and use the gingham, and then just very simply stitch that to the top of the block, like so. And let me get this so you can see it. Stitch that top of the block and press, and do that 49 more times so that you have 50 completed blocks. Once you get to the point of having 50 completed blocks, you're ready to assemble your quilt. And next Friday, I'll have a video walking you through the steps of assembling the quilt. It will be a pretty brief video, just give you some tips of things to watch out for as you assemble it to kind of help keep your quilt straight. So you've got 1 week, hopefully, to finish all your blocks. Don't worry if you don't finish them all on time. I don't have any plans to remove the video from YouTube, so it will be here when you are ready for it.